President Biden is quite literally walking away now from questions about Israel. On answers like that shouldn't surprise us. President Biden has put himself now in an impossible position. Today, the United States, under his direction, vetoed a United Nations Security Council resolution calling for a ceasefire between Hamas and Israel, meaning a unilateral Israeli ceasefire, right? That means it's a huge victory for Hamas. But at the same time, President Biden's team wants a temporary ceasefire. It makes no sense. The lack of moral clarity is stunning. It makes no strategic sense in terms of how Israel is prosecuting this war. But then you've got to think about domestic politics for President Biden. Here's Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, Democrat of Michigan, telling fellow Democrats not to vote for Biden in their own primary.
Right now, we feel completely neglected and just unseen by our government. If you want us to be louder, then come here and vote uncommitted.
All right, the mayor of Dearborn, Michigan, a highly progressive community, says he won't be supporting President Biden in the primary. Jonathan Kott is here, former senior advisor to Joe Manchin, best-dressed man in Washington. Welcome to the program. Thank you. How did Democrats end up with a pro-Hamas wing?
I think it's a very small wing. I think Rashida Tlaib represents a very small segment of the Democratic Party. I think the president is the leader of the party, and he is shown to be probably the strongest president for Israel that we've ever had. I think Rashida Tlaib is part of the party that doesn't care about winning and doesn't care about getting anything done. She's been in Congress a few years, and I couldn't tell you one of her accomplishments other than probably getting a lot of Twitter followers and getting some
and raising a lot of money for AIPAC too,
sure,
because of how she's handled this. We can quibble over the most pro-Israel president or not, but I think what's interesting, Biden's handling of the Israel-Hamas war among voters under the age of 35, just 15% approve of his handling, 70% disapprove. They don't disapprove because they think that he should be more pro-Israel. They disapprove because they think he should be more pro-Hamas. Again, how did Democrats end up with this problem?
I think for the young people, it's where they're getting their news and their lack of information. I think a lot of it is they're getting news on TikTok. They're not actually understanding what is going on. And to your point, it's not a whether they're pro or anti-Israel. These are people who are now saying they're pro-Hamas, a terrorist organization that murdered, raped, and killed babies, women, and children on October 7th. So I think these people need to get a little bit more educated and understand what's actually going on in the world.
Why let facts get in the way of good emotion?
Exactly.
We wrote about this on warnotes.com, which is our daily newsletter.
Which I read.
Well, we appreciate that. But there is a lack of moral clarity coming from President Biden. There's a lack of violence of action, which is how you prosecute a war. It's the only way to win. What I find fascinating is that for a president who seems to want to exert some kind of control over the Israelis, he wants them to hold off from going into Rafah as if that's somehow going to help the Palestinian population, the Muslim population in America, be more pro-Joe Biden. He wants all these things, but does he understand that the more moral equivalence he puts in, the more Israel ignores what he's saying?
I think it's a very fine balance to walk, right? He has to let Israel go and prosecute the war the way they want it, but he also has to unite the world like he did behind the Ukraine effort. And I think right now what you're seeing is there's a lot of countries out there who have no interest in supporting Israel and their efforts and will just always be pro-Hamas. And that's the fine line, because you're getting a
hold on, but this is where I don't understand, and I think that this is a huge missed opportunity as somebody who lived in the Middle East. And you think about the power of persuasion, the power of the president to come out and say, yeah, I think Israel should be doing a better job, but I also think that Egypt needs to be doing a better job. I think Jordan needs to be doing a better job.
Absolutely.
I think the Emiratis and the Qataris, in name and shame. I think the Turks need to be doing a better job. And this seems to be sort of a hallmark of President Biden's foreign policy, is to sort of be half in and half out on Ukraine, half in, half out on taking on the Houthis, half in, half out on taking on China.
Well, I think he's been all in on Ukraine. He's just hasn't.
Really?
Yeah, he hasn't had the congressional support that he wants. We're not putting troops on the ground in Ukraine. We're giving them everything they need to actually beat the Russians. And when we were doing that, when we had congressional support, the Ukrainians were winning. I do think what he's trying to do right now is work more behind the scenes through the UN. You saw the U.S. today reject the treaty by the UN and put in their own. So I think that's what he's trying to do. But I agree with you. These other countries need to step up and do more.
All right. Thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.